You're someone who served in President Trump's first term. People may remember you as well as a witness in some of those congressional investigations. You've joined me for coverage throughout the campaign. As you reflect on today, number one, what do you think it means for the United States to have someone who was initially an outsider and disruptor, now returning after everything? The New York Times called it a comeback. It certainly is that politically. And he returns arguing that he's not an aberration. What does that mean? And what do you say to the concerns, I think many of them good faith concerns around the country, that he will not be a, quote, uniter, which was the word he used in the speech, that he will be something else?
Well, I think I'm hearing a lot of hair on fire this evening that's probably not justified at the end of the day. It might have been a blessing in disguise for President Trump to have to sit out the 4 years of the Biden administration and really consolidate his support, have a chance to think through some of the mistakes he made in the first term, because the support that I'm seeing, irrespective of what the final vote was, whether it was 51 or 52, just the emotional support I'm seeing from all quarters, except, of course, some of the more liberal media, is unprecedented. And for the first 4 years, President Trump had a strong headwind from the moment he came down that escalator. Now, to be fair, some of that was self-imposed, but he spent more time pushing back on the media, on doubters, and now I see that the wind has swung favorably to his back. And I think you're going to see execution on more policy more quickly than you've probably seen in recent memory. Now, that may be bad news for people who don't agree with the policy, but for those who supported him, and I think those who may have even not voted for him, but were very, very concerned and apprehensive about a President, Kamala Harris, I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of sort of upswelling of support as time goes on. And he's being very, very diligent about picking loyalists this time who won't quietly undermine him while pretending to do his bidding. I think what the people that he selected have in common, beside the fact that they have great life experience, business experience, and or political experience, is they really understand what the mandate is and they are prepared to follow through on it.
Yeah, and you alluded to that before the president's remarks with regard to Mr. Witkoff, who, according to Biden administration officials, was able to work alongside and be a part of what I mentioned before, what neither administration seemed to want to acknowledge, which was some level of collaboration. And you said that's a business person that he's recruited. Final question to you then on all of this is, Ambassador, what about these individuals who have been so publicly critical of Donald Trump? What are you, as someone who's straddled this and worked in the administration, what are you to make of people's concerns out in the public who say, well, wait a minute, if many of these tech leaders were so critical of Donald Trump, of what he stood for, specific policies, including immigration first term, and now they've all moved, what do you say to people who view that as a kind of business transactional development and not one of some sort of good faith evolution? That, and in your final thoughts tonight.
Well, I think that's a fair criticism of some, and to a certain degree, perhaps most, that's an element of their rationale for pivoting. But I also see that as time has gone on, you notice President Trump's demeanor, even when he's being raucous. He's not the raucous that he was in 2016 or 15. I think he's become more mature in his skin as a president of the United States. Remember, it's the only job in the world that no one has experience for unless they've done it before. So I think he's really understanding how to pull the levers of power, when to pull the levers of power. And I think a lot of these tech executives are beginning to see in President Trump a little bit of themselves in terms of their own evolution, leading their own businesses.